Hey guys, I'm Leah from Urban 20 Something and the host of the Your Biggest Vision show. And I'm so excited today to take you behind the scenes from a media workshop I was at all day on Friday here in New York City called Pitch Please. This workshop was hosted by Farnoosh Torabi, the host of So Many Podcasts, and Susie Moore, who's a life coach extraordinaire and media mogul. And both of them have extensive experience being featured in the media, leveraging the media to grow their business, and even have background being journalistic in their own way. So it was a hugely informative day. It was lots and lots of fun. And while I could go on and on and on about the things I learned from it, I wanted to distill it down into 5 really helpful points that I gathered from it that I wish I would have known beforehand when it came to thinking about media, using media to grow my business, and what even to do in terms of a strategy about pitching and leveraging it behind the scenes. And that's what I want to share with you, and I hope that you'll find it as helpful as I have. So if you are a side hustler or an entrepreneur or an influencer or an aspiring blogger, anything in that category, and you are looking to get more influence, get more customers, get more authority, and assert yourself more as an expert, then the media is, of course, a wonderful way to do that. Now, one of the things we talked a lot about at Pitch Please, and one of the things that really resonates with the way I run my own business and the way I help my clients, is to use the media to grow your email list. Email list building is the single most important and valuable asset you will have as a business owner. I would argue that it is really more important than anything else. So using media to do that in an explosive way, and not to mention oftentimes in a way that doesn't cost money to you, unlike ads, is hugely valuable. So we talked a lot about what that looks like on the back end, and then also thinking about that when you are thinking about what type of media you want to be featured in and with whom. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that through these tips, but it's important to remember that getting into the media is great, but if you're not getting into the right media, or if you're not getting your ideal customer or client's eyes on the work you're putting out there, it's not going to be so effective long-term and bigger picture. So with that in mind, let's jump into these 5 tips.
We're here at the VIP dinner. Will you guys introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Jamie Jensen. I'm a screenwriter and storytelling expert.
Amazing. I'm Erin Lindstrom. I'm the founder of Shiny Visions and a sales strategist. Yay, money!
Yay, money!
We love money!
So tip number 1 might seem pretty obvious, but it's just to simply have a strategy when you are trying to put yourself out there and get noticed and featured in the media. And that comes with really thinking about what you have the bandwidth to do, as well as what's going to be the most useful for you. So we are all dynamic people. I'm sure you've had a lot that you would want to share, and that would be helpful for others to hear. But really getting focused on what you're doing this for is going to help you not feel like you need to be telling every single story that's ever happened to you on every news outlet just to get noticed. Instead, really thinking about your goal and the bottom line. For instance, if your bottom line is to grow your email list, or maybe it's to have a bit more big names on your website, or maybe you want to connect with other people in your similar niche, or maybe you just want to tell a particular story because you think it'll attract your ideal client. Those all actually look like very different things. So coming at it with your goal in mind, you'll be able to think, okay, what is most important to me? If it's list building, then you're probably going to want to focus all your efforts on places that will give you links to put within your work so that you can be constantly referencing opt-ins that you have, your website, other ways people can sign up for your email address. Some media outlets are a lot more strict about that than others. So take that into consideration when you're researching and deciding which media outlets you want to pursue. On the other hand, if your biggest goal might just be having that authority, having the expertise, having basically this stamp that you've been in a big media feature, then you aren't going to be as worried about whether or not you can build your list or include links, and you're just going to more so focus on the biggest names within your niche and within your work. You can see how having a goal will inform your strategy, and having a strategy will make it feel so much more organized and like you're not just throwing paint on the wall and hoping that it sticks. Once you have a goal, then you can start thinking, okay, maybe this is something I do once a week. I sit down and I look at the Google alerts that are in my inbox related to what it is that I do, and I start reaching out to any magazines or publications that have had those Google alerts because they're clearly interested in something that I do, and I pitch them once a week. Or maybe you start doing it once a month, or maybe you do it 3 times a week. Maybe you do it to, the same place, but different people there. And I'm not endorsing any of these strategies as better than the other. I'm just trying to give you some idea for how getting really clear about your goal throughout this whole thing will help things seem a lot less random, and which will make them seem more attainable. That's one, but really two takeaways: having a strategy and having a goal the whole time. The next tip, which is so useful because it's not so obvious, is to really actually focus on you when you're pitching the media. I think that when you're an entrepreneur, you're always so focused on your customer and what you can do for your customer and what you can do for your clients, and you want to be, continually thinking of how you serve them. And we often write in that way, with their pain points or their pleasure points or their experience, so we can help them understand that we know what they're going through and we can help them through. Yet, when you're writing a piece for a media outlet or a big magazine, it's going to not feel so genuine if you are writing the piece by saying, here are the top 3 reasons you aren't losing weight. Instead, if you can say, here are the top 3 reasons I wasn't losing weight and here's how I was able to overcome it, that's going to resonate with people more actually than you trying to talk about them. Because if you're just saying how you're not losing weight, no one's really going to know if you're talking to them or not, because they know that you don't know them. So if you can sort of share your story, share it from a genuine place, and basically let people take it or leave it the way they want, that piques their curiosity, that gives them more decision over what they want to do with what it is that you're telling them. And it's just more genuine. It's your story, and people will appreciate that vulnerability, and they'll appreciate that you can relate to them because you too struggled to lose weight once upon a time. It's a very different dynamic than you being like, oh, here's why you're not losing weight, and by the way, I look fabulous, and I don't really understand what you're going through. And typically that's not true. Usually if you want to write about something or you have something to tell or share, it's because you've undergone it yourself, or maybe because a lot of your clients have or something like that. But it's usually not because you feel like you can just shout this from an authority figure without ever having understood the pain that might come with it yourself. So being vulnerable and sharing your story will be appealing to audiences, which, will pique their curiosity, which will help media outlets get their numbers and statistics up, which is what they're concerned about. So it really is going to be more helpful for you to pitch your own story. And you can even go through some of the things you want to share and make sure that you're constantly saying, here's how I did it. Here's what I learned. Here were my mistakes. Not here's what you could learn, here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you could improve on, and just making it about you.
Where are you from?
I'm from Chicago. My name is Kimberly. I love reading this video.
Oh, and what do you do? Tell us about your amazing work.
It's for millennial women. I love one practice. Everyone that wants to make their real life reality.
I love it.
Tip number 3, focus on one key takeaway instead of lists. Lists, I think, had their day of popularity, and I know that they're still really popular on some sort of for fun sites like BuzzFeed and things like that. But the days of saying, here are the 10 worst foods you could eat if to not lose weight, are getting smaller and smaller. And I think that that's because people's attention span is getting shorter and they don't want to read a huge list of things. If you can really hone in on one mistake people are making, or one lesson that you really learned, or one huge takeaway from something big that you did, that's going to be more appealing to news outlets, because the list is just sort of dwindling down. One thing is like so digestible. People will see that, they'll read it, they'll remember it, they can start applying it. But a list, it's sort of like, oh God, this is homework now, I don't even know if I'm going to read it. Try to stay away from the list and really hone in on that one takeaway. Here are a couple of examples. Instead of writing something that is 5 things you learned while traveling alone, you could write an article about the one single way traveling alone changed who you are forever. Or instead of writing the 5 biggest reasons you're not losing weight, you could write about the one thing that will always block you from reaching your fitness goals no matter what. Really try to think of that one magnetic thing. And this is actually a great opportunity, because this gives you the opportunity to really choose one thing that you want to be known as, which is another tip coming up, but really hone in on the one thing you want people to remember you by. It can be sort of your signature tip or your signature piece of work or your signature story element or whatever it is, but then that's what makes you stand out, and of course that's what helps people remember you.
What do you do? Where are you guys from? DC? New York. You live in New York, very easy. And what do you guys do?
I'm a Chicago University.
Amazing.
And I'm a relationship counselor. I teach people how to relate.
Thank you guys.
Tip Number 4 is be timely. So think about holidays, think about politics, think about different things happening in the world. Think about different things that might have happened on anniversaries of things a couple of years ago. News outlets love that kind of stuff, especially big ones like TV. They're always looking to connect with their audience on things that are relevant and happening right now. The easier you can make that for them, the easier it's going to be for them to choose you and bring you on that way. One of the examples I thought of during this was when I was on Farnoosh Torabi's podcast last year. Her podcast is called So Money. If you're not familiar with it, I'll link it below. She's so amazing. I cannot recommend her podcast enough. I was one of her guests, and the episode that she had with me, our interview aired on Halloween. Her podcast is all about money, and on Halloween she said, well, my question is, I think it was like, what's the scariest financial situation you've been in, or something like that. So how she linked scary with Halloween is super cute and fun. And so if you can do things like that and think about, all right, well, what is the, what's the theme of this month? Is this month National Women's History Month? Is April Fool's Day coming up and you want to do something about the safety of pranks? I don't know. But really try to get creative with it. It doesn't have to be that direct. It doesn't have to be that you're doing pranks on April Fools. It takes a bit of creativity, but it can be really effective if you make that link for people really early on, because that really gives them the answer of why now? Why should they run your story now? What's urgent about it? What is relevant about it? And if you can just literally link it with a timeline throughout the year, that's a really great way to do it. But it's still worth noting that you want to have that element of this is now, this is important, people like this, people want to know this. There's a reason you should do this now and not in 6 months or a year or whatever. And always thinking about how you can really hone in on that, but especially using holidays and things like that. The 5th and final tip is to pick one thing. So like I mentioned, it can be really easy to fall into the trap of wanting to share all your different stories, all the things you've done, and I'm sure you've done some amazing things, so I completely understand that you would want to share them. But when it comes to media looking to feature you, we've talked a lot about you pitching the media, but when it comes to the media needing an expert, they're going to need an expert. And if you are the woman of all trades, they're not really going to see you as that. They're not going to want to quote you because they just don't really know what kind of authority that gives them, and they care about their reputation and they care about the quality of their work and they want their readers to trust them. But if you don't really present yourself as an expert in one thing, or that you're really focused on a particular area of work or a certain piece of work you've done, then people aren't going to know what your expertise is and they're not going to quote someone that's not an expert. At the beginning especially, if you really focus at the beginning of any project, particularly when you're focusing on a new business, once people get to know you more, especially in this day of social media, you can expand more, you can broaden more. You need to be even more narrow first at the beginning and be patient with it, because you will be able to be more expressive later on. Be clear on who it is that you write for and what it is that you do and why people should think of you when they think of whatever that topic or problem is. Don't worry if it feels like you are going to eliminate a lot of people by doing this. First of all, you might eliminate a few, but most likely what will happen is you'll end up attracting so many more people because they'll know that you're really speaking to them, and you'll make your impact and your influence much bigger and broader and stronger. So thank you so much for tuning in to my day at Pitch Please. I highly recommend attending if you're in the New York area. There's another one coming up this spring. I hope that you found these publicity tips helpful. I'd love to hear below if you've ever been featured in media. Feel free to share with us below what it was. And if you have any tips that have helped you get featured or leverage your media strategy correctly, then please let me know, because the more tips we can have, the better. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you have a wonderful day, and here's to your biggest vision.